Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, February 25th, 2026, and today we're going to be answering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days. And as we do each week on the Roundup, we take our questions that we ask here from our newsletter that comes out on Monday morning. And that newsletter is called All the SMIE News Fit to Share. And it's available in 2 forms, in email, where you can go to our website at smieconsulting.org/subscribe to subscribe one of 2 ways, either to the email version, and there's a box that you can sign up that way, or through our LinkedIn newsletter version. So you have those options, and we encourage you to subscribe if you're not already, because it does really provide users a very easy way to digest some of the top news stories of the day that we oftentimes don't have time in our day to really plow through all the different news sources that are out there. And that's one reason we started the newsletter back in 2017, to really provide my colleagues in international education around the world, but particularly here in the U.S., an opportunity to kind of get the kind of bite-sized hot takes on the top issues of the day on Monday morning, and then we'll dive into the details of some of the themes we see developing in the newsletter each week, and kind of provide next level content on the Wednesday roundup that helps shape how we're thinking about international education and international student issues on our campus, and hopefully providing some relevant context for users to take some ideas back to their campus, to their leadership, and say, hey, we might need to tweak the way we're doing things. This issue is really becoming very significant in our field, so are we able to be responsive to the changes and get ahead of the curve a little bit in terms of preparing our campuses for the challenges that we really face in international education. So I'm dropping the links to both the email version of this week's edition, in addition to the link to the website that I've already put in the chat, a link to the email version, and then a link to the LinkedIn version of the newsletter that you can feel free to use and follow along if you're watching live. Otherwise, please feel free to subscribe to those newsletters so you'll know and have all the links to the stories that we're talking about here today. So between those 2 sources, we're closing in on 3,000 subscribers, and we're hopefully going to hit that in the next month or so. But very proud that so many international educators, and humbled, frankly, so many international educators are making the Midweek Roundup, as well as our newsletter on Mondays, a part of the regular international edification. So thanks again for being part of that journey. It's really my pleasure to be bringing it to you each week. Now, the first topic of the day that I really want to focus our attention on is one that, for those who know me well and know the 6 Ps for Strategic International Enrollment Management that we've talked about and developed during the pandemic, and are now implementing where we work at the University of Akron. I'm stop saying the royal we. I should do that. But where I work now at the University of Akron, where I worked previously at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, we implemented a 6P strategy as we developed our international recruitment, international enrollment, current international student management kind of questions. And that's really what it comes down to, is very much a holistic approach to international student life. Not just the prospect to enrolled stage, but all the way through to successful alumni, and how campuses that align their international student priorities accordingly and campus-wide, and involve all the relevant offices in that student's journey, that international student's journey, are the ones that make certainly the best impact on full life cycle support and hopefully positive outcomes for those enrolled international students. So the question that we're talking about today is, how do you define perspective in international education? And this is important. This is coming out of a colleague who recently, a young, kind of up and coming rising star. Certainly, he's been around now about 4 or 5 years, but certainly he's become very active on in the social space for promoting his institution, UCM, Central Missouri, but also digging into using AI in international student recruitment. And he's got a blog a Substack that he has coming out. Just dropped the link to his most recent edition. That guy named Greg is his Substack. And his thoughts from the road. He is a road warrior. He's out there even more than I am. I know I'm leaving Sunday for a 17-day trip to Vietnam, India, and France, and he's out there as well right now. A lot of colleagues are crisscrossing the globe as we speak to bring in this fall's class. And part of what Greg references in his article this week, Thoughts from the Road, a bigger story than the moment. And he makes the point, I think quite appropriately, that we, for the last year, have been under siege, is a fair way to put it, for lack of a better phrase, in international education in the United States. Because we're at the crosshairs of the current administration's war on higher education and immigration, and particularly illegal immigration. However, international students, because they're coming from overseas, they're classed as seen as potential immigrants, and even though they're not, they're on non-immigrant visas. But they're also, a lot of the policy changes we've seen in the last year have impacted them directly. Not only the ones in the United States now, with all the CVIS terminations we saw last year, the visa cancellations for social media posts, all of those kind of things, but for future students, the removal of the ability to get visas, appointments outside their home country, unless they're living in that other third country, the inability to for visa renewals, for students to have the visa interview waiver, that's been pulled back, the introduction of the travel bans, all those kind of things we know. There's a long list that we don't have time to go into every time. But needless to say, as Greg points out, that we've been bombarded with having to react to policy changes and as much as possible trying to develop strategies to circumvent those, to answer questions, to prepare our students better for visa interviews, to do all the relative things we need to make the obviously very messy political situation as it relates to immigration a little bit clearer for our students. And Greg makes the point, and I'll share that when you're living inside the headlines, this is his quote, you're living inside the headlines every day, when policies shift and rhetoric escalates, it can start to feel like the ground beneath our field is unstable. I don't think there's many in our profession, particularly in the U.S. over the last year, that would disagree with that statement. And the part of his next statement, and the main reason for the piece last week, was, as the saying goes, it's hard to see the forest for the trees. Sometimes the only way to regain perspective is to step outside your own situation. And this is an important point that I completely agree in. And obviously, for those of us who are DSOs, those of us who are recruiters, those of us who might be both or working with international education in any way, shape, or form in the U.S., you feel it in your soul. If you've been in the industry for more than a minute, this feels like, we've talked about this before, that it feels like an existential threat. Some of the things that have been happening cumulatively that really make us feel like we're under attack. And the cool part is that's not always the reality. Obviously, that we certainly feel it every day. We feel every new statement that the president makes on X, or Truth Social, or whatever it might be. We feel everything that as almost a personal attack. The reality is, the rest of the world knows things have changed, and we're not the only country that these things have changed in terms of visa application fees. To Australia doubled in the last year, and they're becoming more strict with who they're allowing into their country. UK's gotten more strict. They've shortened the graduate route for post-study work. They've eliminated dependent visas for master's degree students. They may be taking aim at MRes applicants in the next year who are able to bring got a loophole. They were able to bring dependents that were one of the main reasons for the reaction against. You had the introduction of the international student fee in the UK that is feared to slow the enrollment enrollment numbers to that country. You've seen them deal with also their new national plan for international education. They are not putting any new target numbers for inbound international students, but they are saying, hey, we really need to ramp up our T&E efforts, which means educating students abroad in other countries for a British degree. You've seen in Canada the absolute train wreck that country has become in terms of international education. We had the first public institution announce their closure this past week. There's so much going on in the world beyond just the U.S. We have to step out of our own bubble. And in international ed, we tend to be in a fairly tight echo chamber that we do generally feel like, oh my gosh, woe is me, and the sky is falling, and it's the worst thing ever. But for us, that when we keep in mind who we're dealing with students who know the situation is changing. They don't know all the specifics, and do we want to bother them with all of them that might be superfluous to their actual point of going through this application journey. But the point is, when we go out and meet with students, and Greg mentions this on his trip, he says he's speaking with students who still want to study in the U.S. I did that recently in my trip to Nepal, my trip to Jordan. There were questions that students were asking were different, but there still was that interest. There still was that desire for pursuing an American dream in terms of study here. There's also, Greg was in ISEF for the Dubai ISEF event and had a chance to reconnect with colleagues who are outside of the home environment. But those conversations, our relationships with our colleagues in the field, are the ones that keep us connected, keep us sharing those lessons learned, certainly sharing those conversations, sharing the kinds of questions that students are asking. All of those matter, and it's that perspective that we need to keep in mind. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of our students, and yes, as they look at the United States, they see a lot of change going on. They see a presidential administration that reminds them, if they're from an authoritarian country, in terms of the style of leadership, the cult of personality kind of opportunity that some associate with authoritarian leaders. You see that they see echoes of that in Trump. I'm sure they're reminded of what it might be like for that it's similar to how they live their lives in their own country. But the point is, those students still have a dream, and there is still a legal pathway for them to come to the U.S. and study. It's gotten much more complicated and much more specific in terms of what students have to do to prepare well for the visa interview, for all that. But we have to, when we talk to our future students, part of what we need to do is make sure we're providing accurate information about what the process actually is, and not be sharing and separating our own personal biases, which we do have, and they impact what we do every day on campus in our jobs. But when we're talking to future student audiences, we can't, if we let our personal biases and current feelings on things make that clear to students, we wouldn't have a job. We'd be found out, we should be fired, and because you may be telling what your version of the truth, but is that really? That's not professional. That's certainly not why we are doing what we're doing. And you should be, if you're overseas doing that, then you certainly need to rethink why you're in the business, or if you're in the right job. But for me, the opportunity to have the conversations and to be clear that, hey, yes, things are changing, and we're trying to adapt to those changes and keep you informed. And that's our goal throughout the process, to be as transparent as we can and to be as upfront and give you as much lead time as you need to prepare for the various steps you're going to have to go through. But part of what our job requires us is to think about it from the student perspective, because they're the ultimate consumer. They're the ones who we're trying to convince we're the right place, we're the right institution for them to come, because we can provide them with the best education, the best campus experience, and the proven outcomes, all of that. These are the things that they attract them to the United States, but we also have to fill in the blanks and help them understand the things that they don't know that they need to know about campus life, about the outcome, how the outcomes track, and how jobs are tied to particular academic programs. We're going to be doing an exercise with our career services folks soon on just this very point, on making it clear, particularly for some of our oddly named academic programs, so which might not be common knowledge on what that means, and tying future job prospects to those academic programs. Just the ways that you can help create those pathways and make clear those pathways for students to help make it a clearer and a better value proposition for your intended audiences, because that's ultimately what we have to demonstrate for our campus above any other U.S. school, but also any other college or university that a student might be considering in another country. And that's also the part of perspective you need to have in mind, that students that we're recruiting now aren't just applying to the United States. They're applying to 2 or 3 or 4 other countries, not just institutions in one country or 2 countries. They're applying to multiple countries because they have to keep their options open. They have a dream of studying abroad, and that may be driven because, hey, the internal in-country opportunities aren't there. Then there are serious push factors that are sending them abroad. We're seeing in Vietnam that the government is changing their long-term strategy, and they're realizing that their institutions don't have enough graduate level programs in advanced tech and STEM and cybersecurity, all those kind of things. So they're encouraging Vietnamese students who have undergraduate programs to go and get graduate degrees. So that's a market opportunity for a lot of institutions in the US because we have those programs. So it's about making those connections and making clear the pathways. And when we allow ourselves to just bear the weight to allow students to see the weight of the world on our shoulders in terms of how we view the current state of affairs politically and its impact on our career, that's fatalism at work. It's not working the problem. It's not adapting to change. It's not presenting your institution in light of these larger challenges that students might be facing, how they can better prepare themselves for the journey ahead. And an important part of that equation is, of course, involving your current students. And I've shared this before. We need the perspective on what we do, that we're not the be-all and end-all of recruitment and admissions in terms of what makes a student's decision for them. Oftentimes, they're going to be swayed more by what they hear from a current student, either in a video clip or in a testimonial or an online chat with a current student on your campus who shares what it's like right now. We did this during the pandemic where it was a complete unknown. Hey, what's it really like to be on a college campus in the U.S. during a global pandemic? But those schools that showed their current students shared their experiences on what it was like day to day, that helped paint the picture of, hey, ultimately, that's what every future student wants to know from a current student. Hey, what's it going to be like for me if I come to this institution? I want to meet someone or see someone who's like me, speaks my language, in my program, from my country, whatever it might be. They have opportunities to do that and have that real world current student perspective. That is what really can make or break the deal for you as an institution, and getting that student to say yes, future student is going to say yes to come to your school and make that commitment to you. So that perspective, let's all just be able to step back, go outside, touch grass, talk to students. We have email conversations. We meet those of us who travel on recruitment have opportunities to connect with students. The desire is still there. They're going to be keeping their options open, yes, but when we can talk effectively about the outcomes, about the pathways, about the process, and allow them to connect with our current students, we are providing a much broader perspective for the future student to see about what it's really going to be like for them as a student, not just what it is institutionally in process and transactions and all of that. That's not what a student makes a decision based on. They base it on what's going to be the best outcome for me. And the parents who are paying the bills will also say, hey, what's going to be the best outcome for my son or daughter? And yes, political climates will change and policies will go up and down and make it easier, make it harder. Through the years, the serious students are the ones who are committed, who've done things the right way. They're the ones that will see the benefits. We all know stories of students who've fallen through the cracks or who got caught up in a mistake, from whatever side of the coin you might want to look at that question from. But the point is, we need to get out there and stop having our own pity party. We can't change the level of change that our administration has put on us, what our institutions who have had to adapt are putting on us. What we can do is we can look at the situation, work the problem, and present a pathway, present realistic outcomes, present here's what our current students are saying about what life is like now on campus, so that's the reality that the current student hears, not what we keep locked up in our heads and should keep locked up in our heads about our own personal opinions on the current administration. We don't need to go there. They all feel it too. And certainly, depending on their level of exposure to it, they know our current administration is not the most favorable to incoming things from overseas. But that doesn't apply to everything. It doesn't apply to everyone. But there are certain things that this country will not accept in anymore and shouldn't have ever, but had. And that was allowing folks in who are not here to be students, that are here to do things other than be a student, that have ulterior motives, and that's what they're trying to snuff out. And unfortunately, legitimate students are getting caught up in the process or being turned off by that. So it's up to us to really share, here's what it's really like on campus, here's what our current students are saying. That helps paint the picture that you want your future students to see about the reality of campus life. And in this supposedly very dark time politically, it may well be that, but on campus is not DC, thankfully. Our campuses are where we take care of our students, where we really provide that support network, that we're looking out for them. We're updating them on changes to visa policy, on visa renewals, all these things that matter. So these are the things that I think is important for us to keep in mind, and have that perspective, to step back, step outside, to have the conversations with students, to have the conversations with colleagues, and not just go into a social media echo chamber every time you want to vent. And that becomes your reality, when the reality is somewhere in between. It's not blue skies and rainbows and unicorns. It's not the end of the world. It's a new reality, and how we adapt to that and how we position ourselves, our institutions, our programs, our outcomes, all of that matters most. So there's where we are, and thanks to Greg for his as always, thought-provoking commentary on what we're doing in international education, international student recruitment. Now let's move on to our second topic of the day. This is one that has to do with our state governments. We all know what's happening at the national level, but we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years, our state governments, particularly red states, become much more proactive in terms of their policies and restrictions for state institutions in particular. And the question is, are U.S. states becoming more proactive against international education? And I think the answer to that question will depend very much on the state you are in. And what I've certainly have found that it's certainly better to be in a red state that is out of the perhaps direct focus of the administration in terms of policy and procedures. But it's not a blanket immunity. A couple things that we'll share today. First up is a couple of articles, one from Indiana that is sharing a new state bill that is proposing for particular, again, most of what we're talking about here when we're saying states are getting involved and creating new policies and procedures that are regulating, perhaps that's the better word, regulating more closely international education. We're talking about state universities and colleges. So first one up is kind of an extension of what's been going on at Purdue. For those not familiar, Purdue has had a number of its graduate programs, faculty-led, to prevent or prohibit the enrollment of Chinese students because of national security concerns, of transfer theft, and all of these things that have been part of the China initiative in the first Trump administration. That will not be rebooted, thankfully. But we see state legislatures now stepping in and saying we're going to limit this, put in place a new review system. And in Indiana, the bill, House Bill 1099, oddly enough, places a new foreign influence and research security requirements in place before a state educational institution can admit a foreign student into specified qualifying programs beginning August 26. And they define foreign adversaries as China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. And it has a federal list that allows additional designations under separate process. So it's usually around particular academic programs, chemical, electrical, industrial, mechanical engineering, majors in artificial intelligence, computer science, microbiology, virology. And they can add programs to it. Basically, the bill directs schools to review whether an applicant on their closest family members, which is outrageous, have certain ties, such as employment by a foreign adversary government or membership in a foreign adversary's political party. It also looks into whether the applicant has been employed by the government or served in the military or security services for a foreign adversary. So this is now, according to this House bill, if it gets approved, institutions will have to vet the family members, close family members, which are probably defined somewhere in the bill, to see if they have any ties to foreign adversaries, governments, which, to be honest with you, has been the purview and is a step that consulates in country will make. In these, obviously, in the countries we're talking about, we don't have an embassy in North Korea. We don't have an embassy in Iran. So we're talking about Russia and China primarily as the two. So we have obviously embassies and consulates in both of those countries, open to varying levels of success. But they have been, and certainly for China, those. The civil-military fusion strategy that China has implemented through the Chinese Communist Party. Every institution in the country has a Chinese a CCP party member. That's a VP level for the institution, and it's mandatory at every institution. And then some of those institutions are part of this. Either through grants or funding or direct ties with the Chinese military to fund the research, the espionage, and those types of things that have popped up in the last decade or so. So the wording of the bill, I think, is creating a new layer of vetting that institutions will need to do, and it doesn't say at what point they need to do it, but certainly before they admit a student, whether any close family members have ties to government or military in those four countries. So obviously focused on China. The bulk of international graduate students have come from China and over the past, and India obviously, but India, it's not on this list. So we'll see where that goes. That's number one. The second one is one we're seeing in that's coming up. It'll be in next week's newsletter, but I'll preemptively give you a link to it here. It's for institutions or public institutions in Idaho and Ohio. There's now a totally different perspective here. State bill aims to limit scholarships for international students. And we're going, wait a minute, there's merit scholarships, that type of thing, I guess we have. But this one is specifically focused on taxpayer-funded athletic aid. The principles of both bills is that they should be majority of taxpayer-funded athletic aid should be set aside for local students, not international students. So it's pending legislation in both states right now that, if passed, would and there's another bill in Oklahoma that would prevent public institutions from giving any scholarships to non-citizens, and that's a little bit scary for state institutions in Oklahoma. But the aim is in Ohio and Idaho is to ensure scholarship opportunities funded by state taxpayers go to local students who they say are more likely to stay in the U.S. and contribute to their university's local economies after they graduate. So these are state schools, they're subdivisions of state government, they're funded in large part. Well, that's showing the obviously the ignorance of the state senator, Doug Okunewicz, the sponsor of the Idaho bill, said that they're funded in large part by U.S. citizens. Large part. Let's see. When's the last time you've heard a state institution that has more than a quarter of its budget come directly from state aid? Most institutions now have been operating for the last 10, 15, 20 years, have been operating on the models that require them to go after out-of-state students to balance the books, to keep the lights on, and to keep their programs open and faculty hired. So the goal is with this plan is if we had U.S. residents and that had these opportunities instead of overseas students, particularly athletic scholarships, that basically, I guarantee you, passage of these bills will result in those state institutions, and I guarantee flagships, maybe Idaho won't be as big of a kerfuffle, but you try and do something like that in Ohio and to some of the flagship schools, maybe Ohio State, where it has a number of international athletes on their athletic programs, maybe not football, but certainly basketball. Other programs are dependent on a lot of foreign talent to come in and elevate those athletic programs, which are certainly football, basketball are the revenue generators for most schools in terms of their athletic programs. It's really interesting to see what happens with that in Ohio. Hopefully it won't go anywhere, but in this environment, you never know. But that bill in Ohio and Idaho is certainly a little bit troubling if that were to pass, because for student athletes, that's a big deal. So the last one we'll share is actually out of Texas, which is one of those red states that has had, for the last couple of years, has had a couple things pull out from underneath them in terms of University of North Texas. Many good friends work there, and certainly they're now in a pinch budgetarily because they've seen a massive decrease in graduate master's degrees enrolled students in the last two intakes, $45 million budget deficit, and that's that means budget cuts are coming. Why is that happening? Because of sharp drop in international master's enrollments, and the president of the university has blamed those on visa issues with visa and politics involving international students. So we know in Texas, the last 2 years, the state government has passed legislation that prohibits state institutions from doing business with China, that they can take their revenue directly from students, but not the university can't be paying partners in China. They can't have partnerships with China. In Florida, we've seen a similar thing that they're actually unable to hire Chinese students as graduate assistants at public universities. They now have also H-1B ban on hiring faculty and researchers for state institutions, so at least a pause. So there's some real heavy headwinds that are coming not just from the federal government, but also from some of these deep red states that are really causes for concern and really change the dynamics in terms of recruitment for these campuses. And I know I feel for my colleagues there. I had some conversations with them recently about some of their efforts and what they've been doing. They've been really a model for a lot of us who are keeping our ear to the ground in terms of best practices on recruitment and in-country representatives that they've had in 3 or 4 countries. These are the things that we need to be. I'm certainly keeping my ears and eyes open for changes. But when I see one of those that are folks that I really admire in the business, facing some very real existential challenges to them because of declines, certainly not directly. Directly related to what they haven't done. What they have done is they've become vastly successful in recruiting from Nepal, from India, from South Asia, and that had, when they knew the their China piece of the pie was kind of going away, they had to pivot, and they went all in India and China, and for some of their graduate, India and Nepal and some of their other grad programs in Southeast Asia, those are now being called into question because the visa availability last summer, we all know the train wreck that was for students trying to come last fall, and that extended it again for most of us into the spring term. So certainly they're becoming very much affected by this at the state level. Last question of the day. Why are international alumni so underutilized at U.S. colleges? And this is going to be the easiest answer you'll have ever heard. It's because we don't track them. Not unusual. And anyone who's worked on college campuses and tried to ever build bridges with alumni, it's not easy. And it's not something that I've seen successful. Maybe half a dozen places that have actually dedicated international alumni people on their staff. I know colleagues at Ball State used to do that where I used to work. Iowa State has a very strong alumni person there, good friend, and who's doing outstanding work connecting their alumni with the institution and maintaining those ties. And that's I saw a couple folks comment on a post related to this article that I'm sharing today on LinkedIn that said, "Hey, it's real that hey, when you're not communicated with or even know that you exist out there, when the home institutions don't maintain those ties because they don't track, they don't really ask for you, they try and rely on LinkedIn to provide that nexus that'll keep you connected, but the reality is there's not an organized way. Most schools don't do it well to keep in touch with alumni, and that's part of what as you're rolling out strategic international enrollment plans. When we talk about a holistic approach to international enrollment management, it needs to include that very important piece at the end, that alumni piece, explaining what that is earlier in the process for students as they come in as first-year students, that you have the alumni testimonials that are part of your programming for recruitment, because it all feeds back. You want your international graduates to not only graduate but get jobs, right, and become successful in whatever they do, whether in the U.S. or back home. And tracking that, maintaining those relationships, that takes work. And it's for state institutions, it's easy to do, and a requirement that you focus on your bread and butter, which are going to be your U.S. domestic resources and primarily in-state resources. But the reality is our student graduates go everywhere, and when we can leverage those and by maintaining contact, that's the real piece. How you do that is important. We've talked about that before. We're going to start tracking student messaging apps when they apply for graduation, so that we keep tabs on them, because we know that that's how students communicate now, that they're not going to keep their institutional email after they graduate. They're not going to do that. They'll have a personal email. They might check occasionally, but they're really living on their messaging app. So tying into that as the way to keep in touch, as a way to keep those relationships going, that's the piece that we really need to work towards. And they are our most powerful global asset, and when we can take advantage of that. So that's all we have today for you. We've gone a little bit over time, and thank you for bearing with me, but hopefully the content was useful for you today. We will be out of the country for the next 2 Wednesdays, so depending on my schedule, I may or may not be able to do a live from wherever I am in the world. We'll see how well I'm doing at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night or later to do these kind of sessions, or we'll be back with you on March 18th. So that's probably our guaranteed next live in person. So until then, we wish you the very best.